flower essences, which you're going to learn how to make your own flower essences in this class, and like 2 classes. And then we look at flower baths, like a cold, which is pretty much bathing yourself in a big essence. It's like making a big flower essence and pouring it over your head or over your feet or whatever. And we'll learn how to make both of those in your medicine making class. And so, and I'll also provide information for the Bach tradition of flower essence, which was developed by a man in England. And I very much respect his work. Yeah, totally white man developing that lineage, and also dedicated his entire life, you know, to working with the plant nations to save his sick partner. Like, very good human, totally respect his works. And they're just different ways to look at making flower essences. So we'll examine both of those ways, not to worry, in a couple of classes. But vibrationally, when we're using Morning Glory flower essence, she really has an affinity for peeling back layers of trauma, specifically sexual trauma, but trauma in general, specifically when that trauma has been numbed by addiction. Okay. And we see this a lot with survivors. We're going to see a lot with survivors of sexual and reproductive trauma, any kind of trauma, I think it's safe to say, but specifically early childhood, specifically anything that has been to such a level where it's like legit, like complex PTSD or PTSD, right? We're like unable to kind of address it within our mundane life, unable to kind of keep going with making money, with whatever, feeding our kids, doing our jobs, writing our books, without numbing that pain, right? And disproportionately, survivors of sexual and reproductive trauma do end up with addictions. You know, I can certainly attest to the fact that I smoke copious amounts of marijuana, and I'm not trying to put down that plant nation. I loved when we did our first check-in, like, this is my first class actually that I wasn't the only one to be like, my favorite herbal ally is weed. And I do love her, but I also can witness myself that it is me numbing, you know, it is me numbing. And because I'm not incorporating her into my life frequently in ways that are more sustainable. It's like copious, you know. And the reason for that is because if I'm having memories, you know, come up, or maybe you know, triggers, to so to speak, coming up, it's like, but I still have to wake up and like do the work, teach the class, feed the kids, whatever. And so that's where kind of like, even if we are privileged enough as survivors to have had ceremonies, to have had therapy, to have had healing, to have had decent nutrition, things that would actually like kind of tame that trauma a little bit, still the world in and of itself, I would say, existing in the modern world can be quite jarring. And so lots of us survivors do tend to numb, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's, yeah, even more hard drugs. And so specifically, we're going to incorporate Morning Glory. Think to the Morning Glory flower essence when we're looking, when the picture is presenting as sexual and reproductive trauma and or psychedelic experiences that are then being numbed, okay, that are not, we don't actually have the space and time to integrate those. And ways that we can incorporate Morning Glory essence, flower essence, is going to be taken internally. So you can make your own Morning Glory flower essence, take it internally. They also sell them in the Bach tradition. It's also recognized in the Bach tradition as treating addiction. And or plant baths, lovely to make a Morning Glory flower plant bath protocol following psychedelic experience, lovely integration. Spritzer, we're going to learn how to make our own pusangas, wonderful, right? You could use throughout, you could even do the plant baths, the flower baths during the psychedelic experience if it's prolonged, for example. You know what I mean? If we're talking moon dance, we're talking sun dance, we're talking 10-day hike through Wirakuta country with the Huicholis, where I'm thinking of this one time I was there where it's like this 90-year-old peotero, and I'm like, can we eat now? And he's like, why do you need to eat? I'm like, it's been 6 days. And like throughout the prolonged psychedelic experiences, or maybe someone struggling also to come down and integrate, we can use throughout, because it's a beautiful vibrational medicine. So the physiological constituents are not going to actually conflict. Okay. All right. Next slide. All hail to the morning glory. And just before we go, frequently when I sing to Morning Glory, and this was actually one of my first plant medicines I received a song from as a teenager, taking my Bach flower essence practitioner training. I often visualize her as like almost like eating like datura flower, like they're about the darkness. Like morning glory flowers bloom during the moon, they bloom at night. Again, thinking about when is this plant like current, you know, they help you see through the night. They help like all of that, like the vulture medicine, like similar families of medicine where it's like not only can they handle your darkness, but they actually are nurtured from it. So it's like a very symbiotic relationship there. And again, very interesting that the seed of morning glory is so potent when it comes to psychedelic experience, and then the flower helps with the integration. Okay, next slide. That's just morning glory again. I just think plants are pretty. Okay. So blue tansy is a wonderful herbal ally for integrating the psychedelic experience. Frequently used in folk medicines for many generations across the globe. Wonderful for supporting brain health. A lot of the herbal allies in this section support brain health, support oxygen flow. And why is that? Because with the psychedelic experience, hopefully it's, you know, sometimes we could be looking at a picture where the psychedelic experience itself is traumatizing, right? So some of the plants are just like morning glory, where we're like, ooh, whatever, like we need to come in and kind of first aid that. And then some of them like blue tansy are to really ingrain that experience. Okay, so we're thinking of blue tansy and we're talking aerial parts, we're talking flowers, and we're talking leaves of blue tansy internally, physiologically. So we're not talking essence, we're talking in teas, we're talking plant baths. You can certainly experiment. I mean, one of the beautiful things about vibrational medicine of plants, even though it's definitely very highly debated in the herbalism community, is that there's so much freedom to practice and like explore your own relationships and not kind of like be in legal liability. So certainly feel free to make plant baths or flower essences from the flowers, but physiologically on a physical level, the aerial parts of the flowers and the leaves, which the leaves would be more potent than the flowers, promote oxygen to the brain and also aid in opening up the what we would call the pineal gland or the third eye. So opening up clarity of vision. I look to blue tansy um, when we want to, you know, it could be an herbal ally for ingraining that positive psychedelic experience. Okay, so like we really want to bring this back to our mundane life, so to speak. There can often be the feeling of like, this is all great and well, but like I woke up tomorrow and like again still have bills to pay, still have this, and to me the lack of integration can create a fracturing, almost like your spirit or your higher self lives in a different place than your mundane self, which is not what we're going for. With survivors, we want less fracturing instead of more fracturing. And so the blue tansy can be wonderful for integrating. So just like taking in tea or tincture or capsule or steaming or bathing, any of the physical ways to integrate her like that throughout, you know, a month. For example, a beautiful thing could be like following a psychedelic experience that's positive, that you're really bringing that information back to your life. For example, ketamine clinics. I'm not a huge fan, particularly myself, but I do understand that the science is out. And I've talked to survivors who have found that extremely healing. Like they found releases within that ketamine clinic setting that they've never found before, you know, in therapy or otherwise. And so wanting to kind of bring that feeling of empowerment back to their mundane life and kind of not go back maybe to some of those old ways of thinking or old ways of maybe picking violent partners, or who knows, you know, who knows how it's presenting. But we could use blue tansy, for example, in tea for the following month, see how it goes. No, with any of the herbs, as a holistic herbalist, I definitely, as an original instructions herbalist, as an eco-sensual herbalist, you know, I definitely recommend just see how it goes. Like any relationship, you don't need to be like, yes, like take this for 3 months now. For me, with survivors, I like to work a lot with the moon cycles. It can be very cyclical. You know, our memory and our bodies and minds is very cyclical. Sometimes if it's reproductive trauma, for example, like forced sterilization or like a very violent routine exam or abortion or something like that, frequently we can have those memories in our bodies and our minds resurface around that time. No, it's like our bodies remember. And so blue tansy can be wonderful for incorporating, but just see how it goes with any of these herbal allies. I like to work first, you could work like with a week, a moon cycle, like that, and see how the relationship goes with your client, you know. Okay, next slide. Rose flower. Okay, we love rose, so beautiful. All hail to the rose nations. And so rose is a beautiful herbal ally for integrating psychedelic experience when it comes to supporting the nervous system. Sometimes psychedelic experiences, again, whether it's birth, death, cosmic sex, ayahuasca, just a really good therapy session, a good dance, anything. Sometimes it can be very nurturing, and sometimes it can be quite jarring, to come back into what I would say is mundane life. Now, even for me, like after a good massage, or for me as a survivor, I can tell you that acupuncture, I can't stand it. And this is going to present differently in every survivor. I'm not saying this is across the board, but just as an anecdotal example, I really can't stand the acupuncture. Like, I recognize that it's very useful. I even teach it some in my doula trainings because it is so useful. However, for me, it's something about like the needle penetrating, and the fact that I don't really know the people, and the fact that it's like kind of more clinical, and the fact that when I've had it before, they just stick you and leave, like that, the whole thing. Like, I've literally been in acupuncture sessions where I take the needles out myself and leave because it's that jarring. And then being told like, we're gonna activate all this energy and you're just gonna like drive home, which I'm like, awesome. Great, thanks. So that can be, and not every survivor feels that way, but that could be something even with a therapy session I've had, you know, EMDR sessions where we're going back into some of my memories of sexual trauma, and it's very difficult to then just like jump back into life. And so rose petal, I would look to rose petal tea. We're talking internal physiological. um, so capsules, teas, tinctures, you know that I'm a big fan of working with the whole plant whenever possible. A nice rose petal tea, I mean, that's just lovely. That's just a nice, lovely, beautiful, considered a nutritive herbal ally that can be taken lifelong, and specifically integrated like right in that moment. Like, even if you're the one hosting psychedelic experiences, even like at closing, no, could offer like a nice rose petal tea, heart opening. She's also been known to calm the nervous system, just very gentle. It's not like she's like super packed with all these really intense physiological properties, but just slight nervine, slight adaptogenic, just like gentle support, heart opening and gentle support to just calm the nerves and help us just kind of simmer down. I just simmer down. Vibrationally, you know, amongst the plant community and many herbalists, rose petals considered, and this is weird because it like puts a hierarchy on vibrations, which I don't really adhere to, but like the rose petal is like the highest vibration of plant, aka like very pristine vibration, like very heart opening. You know, there's a reason, I do think there's a reason why rose has been incorporated um throughout humanity as like a love, you know, it's like what we give when we're in love, or to celebrate, or to honor someone. And frequently you can even see like here in Peru, like in Pagos de la Tierra, where you give like an offering to the earth, or at a death ceremony, we give roses frequently, graduation, you know, someone does a good play. So it doesn't matter unless it does. It does matter. It does matter, but physiologically, it doesn't matter. What would matter more physiologically for the constituents of the plant is what soil it's growing in, and if that soil actually is mineral rich, you know, like if it's been monocropped at a flower farm for a long time, or if it's just like growing on a fresh, nourished plot. But energetically, yes. Energetically, yes. Like in the Pagos de Tierra, we specifically need to use like red roses for the feminine and yellow roses for the male. And some of the like plant baths that I've seen done by maestras down in the jungle for healing sexual trauma, they like always use white or pink, you know. Um, Energetically it matters. But yeah, so look to the rose internally and vibrationally for just like opening the heart to the new lessons learned during the psychedelic experience, and also nurturing the nervous system when integrating back into what we would call like mundane life, you know. Yeah. Okay, just another picture of rose. We just love roses. You could also, again, rose is considered an edible herb, so it's like chocolate dipped roses, cacao dipped roses, putting her in salads, like everything like that, working with whole plant whenever possible. um Rose was actually the first plant I ever received a song directly from when I was 10 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, which is like heavy on the rose energy. Portland's all about the roses and the Rose Bowl and stuff. So I would just say, like, just such a beautiful medicine. I do know those who have dieted just only rose, only rose, like through plant baths and vibrations, just all for heart opening, healing the love. Beautiful, beautiful layers of love. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Grounding the experience. Wow. It's another waterfall in Iceland. So nice. um, um, grounding the experience. Okay. So let's just keep going with the plants. Fern leaves. Okay. So yeah, so grounding the experience, I'm like trying to remember what I even wanted to say with that slide. Grounding the experience, I put that one there because we did already go over this about like how important it is to integrate the metaphor with birth. The real work starts when you have to integrate, blah, blah, blah. But I will say that I definitely see, like, just to further that point and specifically towards like bringing it back down to earth. Okay. I do see a ton of almost like it's better to be floaty. Like I see even in our verbiage, no, like I'm ascended or I'm higher or I'm a light, like the light worker thing to me is just like, wait, why is dark bad? Like, wait, are you still on the like white is better than black? Like what's happening? so so it's just like a lot of language. And that's why even right when talking about roses as an herbalist, I like hesitate before being like, it's the highest vibrating, like who says so? Like high, like where's low? Like it's a circle. I thought we lived on a globe that's pear-shaped. I don't like what, like it totally depends on what is higher or lower based on your perspective, no? And the inherent suggestion when we use language like I've ascended or I'm floating or I've higher or light worker or even starseed. And I'm not like, this is not a class about the star nations. I totally believe in the star nations and have had my own and have been an 18-year-old girl traveling to Alaska being like, this is my card. I'm a mycelium magi and light worker. Like I am not judging those of us in our group who have done this. It's just something in examining myself where it's like that almost to me has placed and especially this is a loophole that I find survivors fall into frequently, where we want to escape, we want to ascend, we want to kind of like again compartmentalize and fracture away from the integration of the fact that we are living on this earth for a reason. That John Trudell album, one of my favorite lines is, without earth there is no heaven. So it's like, sure, there's star nations, sure, there's God, sure, there's Christianity, those of us in the group, Christian, Catholic, Muslim, and whatever you may practice. But it's like, we're here now, though. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, why are we spending in a way, like I do see this a lot in the healing communities and even amongst practitioners. I will say I have not seen this as much among traditional indigenous practitioners, but more so in holistic or more new age communities, where it's like this almost obsession, I would say obsession level with like ascending or transcending. But it's like, but we're here for such a finite amount of time. It's like, even if you're not spiritual, it's like on the big scale of things physiologically, we're here for such a short window of time. And in a way, it's like such a blessing that we are actually here being able to ground this into reality. And so I definitely see the need for grounding, coming back to the earth, making sure that we incorporate some of these herbal allies in the coming days, minutes, weeks, and years after the psychedelic experience, so that we're kind of curbing the instance of people floating around out there. I can't count the amount of people I've met who was like, I had a Kundalini awakening. The seventh water god like initiated me in the realms. And I'm like, awesome. Like, you look like you haven't eaten in days, like can I give you some broth? And again, not judging, that's me. I'm making fun of myself when I'm using these voices. These are things I've actually said before. So so it can be wonderful to just integrate these herbs that just like very much grounding, in addition to all the other practices like therapy and stuff we're going to cover. Okay, next slide. Oh no, I didn't even go over fern leaves. Sorry, I didn't go over fern leaves. I'm just like looking at the ferns. So ferns, are one of the most prehistoric plants, right? All of the plant nations, or most of them, other than the ones that we as humans have bred recently, are our plant ancestors. They are much older than the human species and much older than most animal or mammal species in general. The ferns, though, particularly, there's evidence of ferns being present even, since the dinosaurs, right? So they're one of the only plants that have survived the shaking of the earth and her cycles time and time again. So I like to incorporate fern leaves a lot in essences, plant baths. I'm talking about the vibrational aspect of the fern right now. So thinking about plant baths, essences, hot baths, or steams to ground down into the deep history and cellular memory of Earth. Okay, of Earth, and the ancient memory of all of those cycles, of all of those cycles, and without sounding like too cheesy, the fact that really everything that's been on Earth for billions of years or millions of years, depending on your religious background, however old you think Earth is, nothing's left. It's like no one's getting out of here alive. That's a guarantee. And so it's like, but we are all still living together. No, I mean, legitimately, our bodies, our parents' bodies, our ancestors' bodies are made up of minerals and nutrition from the earth that was here since ferns first grew. And so I like to use fern essence in that way to ground out the psychedelic experience and also connect back with that super ancient memory that no one's getting out of here alive, baby. No one's getting out alive. Just like we got to bring it down to that idea that again, without sounding too cheesy, that truly on a physiological level, even if you're not spiritual or your clients aren't spiritual, we're all cousins, with the plants, with the animals, with each other human races. There aren't even really different human races. Like we just made those up. So we can start there. But that we're all connected in that way because, and that helps me a lot when I feel like the earth is just dying and I see like the styrofoam and the trash and the cement. And it's like interesting to remember that the styrofoam, the cement, the shit water, all of the things are made up of the same physical elements that our ancestors, like it all came from the earth at some point. Did we as humans combine it in a disadvantage, like in a yucky way? Sure. But is it all essentially from the earth and was all here? All those materials that we use to make styrofoam was here for a long time. And so, yeah, that's why ferns. Think about ancient memory. Think about really connecting back with that primordial source and using her in a vibrational way or them in a vibrational way to integrate that psychedelic experience. I like ferns. I'm sorry. I just love plants. If you can't tell, they're most of my friends. Yeah. Oh. I'm like, I don't have human friends. No, no. Tobacco flower essence. Okay. And so this is another, like morning glory, going to be a patron plant, both of integrating psychedelic experience and healing sexual trauma and reproductive trauma. When we look at the tobacco plant, let's just do like the whole plant, not just the essence. So when we look at the whole plant of tobacco, and this is a huge one, and you'll see frequently that humans have incorporated the use of tobacco with altered states for time immemorial, frequently and across the continents. You'll see different cousins of tobacco because there are many different cousins and sisters and primas and variations and iterations of tobacco, but you'll see across the continents, whether it's in the Yoruban culture here in West Africa, whether it's in the Amazon, whether it's in North America, some of the indigenous cultures in Europe and Asia, all use tobacco. I don't know that much about the Aborigine in Australia. That's why I don't mention it much, but probably, if I had to guess, I would be like, yes, probably, because tobacco is so grounding. I mean, this should be right. The first actual slide of grounding the experience. Tobacco physiologically and energetically is so grounding. Physiologically, you can use the leaves internally as a purgative. So to make yourself throw up or cleanse or have diarrhea. So the leaves are going to be anti-parasitic, antifungal, antibacterial. So that's part of why this plant has been integrated by humans for time immemorial, because parasites can eat your brain and affect your emotions and affect your diet and eat your teeth and all sorts of things. We have a whole nother class on cleansing parasites with herbal medicine. I also am very passionate about that. And truly, I mean, I hesitate again from the hierarchy of plants. I don't like to prescribe to that, but I would say a master plant if we ever did have one. No, I mean, tobacco really truly has been there for the humans from time immemorial, and has led to some really sad times in our history as well. You know, I'm from the South, I'm from North Florida, and certainly like tobacco plantation, there's some good history and some, yeah, there's, for me, tobacco is like, it's been with us humans for so long that it's almost had different lifetimes reflecting our human nature, for good and bad, for good and bad, you know, at our highest moments, for praying, for doing our long ceremonies, and also for the bad times, you know. And so I would look to tobacco to ground out and equalize our human nature in that sense, you know, our human nature in that sense, and that it is all part of our lineages for good and bad. We all have ancestral lineages that, again, were very healing and then not so much, you know, all of us, every single one of us sitting in the circle. And so tobacco, and the guarantee is and definitely there that your ancestors, no matter the lineage you're from, have incorporated tobacco into their practices, whether it was smoking cigarettes, again, for good or bad, whether it was smoking cigarettes, whether it was in prayer, whether it was whatever. And so wonderful for ancestor offerings, wonderful for incorporating into ancestor offerings following the psychedelic experience, wonderful for integrating the experience physically during the psychedelic experience. You'll frequently see, for example, in ayahuasca ceremonies, like the sopla of mapacho tobacco is very key, very key. I've actually walked out of an ayahuasca ceremony before after taking the cup of ayahuasca, when I was told, oh no, only I can have the tobacco, like the curandero, the fake person. Yeah, they were like, oh no, our people who are participating can't have mapacho, only me. And I was like, okay, bye-bye. Bye. Because right, that was a big red flag for me. That was a big red flag. And I just straight up didn't feel safe, because tobacco is one of the main tools and plant allies for protection, for grounding, and for holding your own boundaries. So tobacco in her various iterations, because there are indigenous forms of tobacco to all continents, is a wonderful alternative for smudging and for protection that's not white grandfather sage. And yeah, all of those things for part of the reason my understanding, at least in the indigenous nations or some of them in the north, is that tobacco is like considered the most sacred or one of the most sacred plants, because right, we smoke her, we dry her, and we pray into the tobacco while we're smoking the pipe, and then the smoke transmutes the prayer and goes all the way up to the sky like that. And so it's one of those plants that is thought in many indigenous nations to be able to directly carry your prayers to great spirit, to God, to whatever that is. It's very interesting that it's become such a sickness, that it's become so defiled into like modern day cigarettes, you know, to the point where it can make us sick like that. I would say similar to the coca leaf. We're not going to go over coca leaf in this class, but I will say here in South America, coca leaf is, I would say, like considered as sacred, like that, to many of the indigenous nations here. And then you have cocaine, you know, and so which can be very not healthy. And so it's interesting, like these really big spirits that I would say, and not to quantify, but I would say I look at it, let's neutralize it a bit. Let's, instead of saying big or little or quantifying or commodifying, let's say like a little more spicy, a little more spice, a little more spice. We think about relationships. You have certain friends that you're like, oh yeah, cool, I can take this friend anywhere. They have tons of range, like they can get along with anyone, no problem. And then we have some friends, some of us may be that friend, who are more like, oh, like they require a bit more space for their energy, like they may not get along with everyone. That's when we start looking at tobacco, peyote, ayahuasca. Tobacco and coca are one of those plants where it's like it does not mix with everything. And it's interesting to me how humanity, it's like, again, with the ceremonies and everything, like we want to kind of like harness or own that power. I feel like we want to like own that personality, and so we like put it in cigarettes and like added stuff to it. And I don't know. It's an interesting journey to watch unfold, but not to go down the rabbit hole. So for essence, we can use the tobacco flowers, and it doesn't matter the color unless you're specifically working with medicine wheels that care about that. But the essence, so we talked about physiologically, you can use her as a purgative, you can physically smoke her for prayers, you can smoke her for grounding. It does close down physically some of the bronchial tubes and the capillaries in the lungs. And so, be mindful of that. But the flowers vibrationally are wonderful for healing sexual trauma, and also um, integrating psychedelic experience through feeling that protection, I would say, inside. The tobacco flower essence, so we're talking like flower bath, flower essence. Internally, I use her for survivors and people who are coming down from psychedelic experiences or integrating psychedelic experiences that specifically need to feel that protection. Okay. So that have lacked, that have felt a lot of neglect throughout their life, or perhaps just in the psychedelic experience felt a lot of neglect, also could be a thing. And who really want to feel that safe protection from within. If you look at, a lot of times, especially with in general, but especially with vibrational plant medicines, um, you can look to the plant nations like you do a friend, you can tell where the laugh lines are, you can tell where the frown lines are. Our bodies tell our stories in a way, our personalities tell our stories, and so too the plant nations. And so you look at the tobacco flower, it's growing on this beautiful strong stalk, super protective leaves, very powerhouse of a plant personality. And then you have these just delicate, just skin, like so fragile, almost like flowers, but they put out this scent that's very earthy, that's very grounded, it's very seductive, but in this like very sticky, icky, earthy way. The resin from the tobacco flowers is beautiful medicine, just that essence, that sticky, icky of the earth. And you look at these beautiful, gentle flowers swaying in the breeze right now, and it's like they're held up so well and protected so much by that strong stalk and leaves. And so that's the vibrational imprint when we're working with tobacco flower baths. You could also incorporate the tobacco flowers into your smoking blends, into your Waitasca wraps, your uterine or abdominal herbal wraps, like that. Thanks. Okay, corn silk and pollen. So physiologically, this is an herbal ally, ancient herbal ally, frequently overlooked. And also, I would say, like the tobacco and the coca, degraded heavily by modern culture, because, right, we've taken these like thousands of cousins of corn nations that have been developed by different indigenous nations, and very sacred, very, very sacred. I can tell you, as a Pueblo Como woman, corn pollen is even more important to me than tobacco in that way. Like if I hope I never have to pick, but if I had to pick like one plant ally or tool to come with me when I die, just for any of you, if you're like there when I die, corn pollen in my left hand. And don't let them do an autopsy unless you think I was murdered. Okay, so corn pollen is very, very sacred, and corn in general, and one of those seeds that have just been developed and kept sacred and kept alive by indigenous nations for time immemorial. I can't even quantify it. We don't really know. But then it's been like bastardized, right? It's like almost like the modern culture of like, now we have sweet corn, like in a can, like just like one type of like yellow sweet corn that's like super prone to pests eating it. So they have to like douse it in and pesticides, and it's just like the medicinal property is just like not there, the nutritive property is not there, and the genetic memory, I think more importantly, the genetic memory of the heirloom corns is not there. Which, again, not to go down the rabbit hole, but sometimes I do speculate, like, is that why they did that? Like, wait, what? I can remember specifically having like a meltdown in the grocery store when I was I think like 6 or 7. My mom is, like I shared at the opening, fully white, or as far as we know, fully white, and a badass. She's passed on now. Totally honor her lineage, but not definitely in touch with my dad's culture at all. And they were separated. And so I was like always looking for the corn that wasn't yellow, like specifically, and would have dreams about it, you know, dreams about it. My dad abandoned me when I was quite young, and so it was like also like I think a way for me to maybe connect back with that or something. And I remember walking with her like in a Publix in Florida, right, with my mom, and seeing it was around Thanksgiving, and they put out the multicolored heirloom corns like as decoration, and I was like, Mom, there it is, like let's buy it, like so excited about my fucking not yellow corn. And then she's all, oh yeah, that's just ornamental, you can't eat that. And I like straight fell to the ground crying like in the grocery store because I was just like I can't take it. It's very just illustrating like I think like the genetic memory of how important it can be for, especially I know North and South American indigenous nations cannot be overstated. And also like I speculate, why is it so important? Like why do they have to pick like the most important, like why tobacco, why corn, like why'd you got to go for that one, like why? And it's I don't know, I almost am like, are you try, or is it like the whole colonial thing where you're like, no, I can make this better, but you just like made it so much fucking worse, like everything bad. I don't know, we'll never know maybe. But physiologically, the corn silk, okay, so the hairs that come out of the corn, first of all, very fun to braid and hang out with. But secondly, you can use them physiologically for supporting the kidneys, a gentle way to support the kidneys, a gentle way to regulate hydration within the body. So you can make a corn silk tea. You can put corn silk in your stews. Most people just throw them out nowadays, but like wonderful medicine. And I will say, like, check to make sure that it's not pesticide corn, because they do specifically douse, even if it's yellow corn silk, still it has the properties, but you just want to make sure that they didn't douse it in the chemies, just because like yellow corn is so sweet. It's not pest resistant, you know, like the older ones. And so, but you can put it in your stews and your teas, I guess a capsule, but it doesn't really have a strong taste at all. So there's not really a need. Like you could literally add it to a base of any stew or add it to a base of any tea or coffee even. Um, and so wonderful for regulating the hydration in the body, wonderful for supporting the kidneys. I frequently would look to corn silk tea when I'm looking at maybe clients who have a lot of swelling, you know, at the end of pregnancy or postpartum. Also, mm, yeah, regulation of the kidneys and hydration. Oh, a diuretic, antibacterial, antifungal. So when we talk about the sexual trauma, I also frequently will use this as a very gentle herbal ally for treating like UTIs, STDs, not instead of getting main medical care, but just like to gently alleviate some of those symptoms. So we'll go back over this one as far as just like herbal allies for sexual trauma. But as far as integrating the psychedelic experience, something that can be taxed frequently in the psychedelic experience is like the kidneys, and the hydration, right? There can often be like fasting involved in the psychedelic experience, or maybe you just forgot to drink water or haven't eaten in a while. And so it can be a wonderful, like even again during, right? It's not, I would say this is not a plant energy that's like, get out of my way, I'm here. It's like very integratable, very multi-nation, and very supportive to the hydration and the kidneys, and just like move any bacteria out that may be sitting in the urethra after the psychedelic experience, because maybe we'd be on the ground, maybe we didn't have underwear on, maybe we didn't drink water for days, like we don't know. So it's just like all for good kidney and urinary tract health. And then very grounding energetically, in the sense that it's just been with humanity for so long, like tobacco. I put Ann Pollen there if it's culturally relevant for you. I will say, like, as a Pueblo Como woman, the corn pollen, so like that grows, you'll see like little yellow pollen that grows at the tips of the corn silk right before harvest time. And the corn pollen, you know, is what we use to actually make the pathways into the new world, or make the pathways into the spirit world. Like, and my cosmological beliefs, it's like I want to stay walking on the corn pollen path, you know, and meaning that like we're still in touch with like regenerating our own foods, we're still in touch with the genetic memory of our old seeds. For me, it's been a practice for a long time to kind of like carry corn pollen with me wherever I go to leave offerings, because that speaks to my ancestors on that side. And I would speculate probably to yours too, somewhere along the way. Because again, there's been indigenous relatives of corn, Europe, North and South America, all over like that. So, okay, horsetail, all the kinds. It's very informative subtitle there. So horsetail and again, horsetail will come up when it comes to first aid for survivors of sexual and reproductive trauma, because horsetail is wonderful in so many ways. It's so nutritive, rich in trace minerals, rich in silica, calcium for building like long life health, bone health, kidney health. And again, when we look at survivors physically on a physiological level, especially long-term survivors, so who have been maybe dealing and processing the trauma for quite a while, we see a lot of times depletion of the adrenal system, depletion of the kidneys, and depletion of like nutrition, either because of just neglecting the self, not having access to the things, all being in a constant state of fight or flight to the point where you're not actually grounded down enough to nurture yourself in the good ways. So for many reasons. So we'll circle back around as far as like first aid for survivors. But as far as grounding the psychedelic experience, horsetail is going to be, again, all the things I just said, like nutritive, nourishing to the kidneys. If you haven't maybe been taking care of your hydration and nutrition throughout the psychedelic experience, which is quite common. I'm sorry, Michaela, I'm just doing a sound check. Am I okay still? Okay. Are you sure?
I just heard like a little bell in the background for a sec.
You don't hear like a TV in the background? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Okay, great. I'm like, I do, but you don't, so that's great. So for grounding on the psychedelic experience, not only is horsetail wonderful to take internally, so tinctures, capsules, teas, horsetail doesn't have a particularly like strong taste either. So wonderful to put like in the base of stews, like a psychedelic integration stew is probably one of my favorite methods. I got into this real young with, I didn't go to high school. Thanks for joining my class. I have an 8th grade education. Or our class. No, I have other vocational trainings, but not much. And I did not go to high school. I tried. They wouldn't accept me because I was like a homeless kid on the streets with no legal guardian. Um, and my high school was pretty much taking psychedelics. That's what I did a lot of. From 14 on, I was in Florida, and lots of psychedelic mushrooms grow in the cow fields there. And so my first experiences with it, I had already been exposed to traditional ceremonies and things. So I knew to like leave offerings. I knew how to like harvest the mushrooms in a good way, thank God. And like that. And frequently would find myself, even though I was like a younger person in the group, or like at the festivals, I was like in the rainbow gathering, the festival circuit, string cheese, fish, all of that. And I would frequently find myself like caretaking, even then, even at 14, 15, 16, being the one who was either like bringing the mushrooms because I literally harvested them myself, or the one being like, no, let's do an offering, guys. Or the one, this is where my point's going to, or the one being like, here's some soup that I made, like at the end of in my mind, our ceremony. I will say that, probably most of the people participating, it was more like a party. But I've loved experimenting with that, what I call like integration stew. It's just like such a primordial type of way to integrate the plant nations. And the primordial stew of herbs and root vegetables mainly is what it revolves around. And horsetail would be like a wonderful, wonderful plant to put in the base of that stew for psychedelic integration. It's going to restore the minerals. It's going to support the kidneys, help with hydration, also a diuretic, so help with that urethra and bladder health, which can be affected. I don't know if y'all have had that experience, but frequently when we're in altered states, we can forget to like eat or drink. And it's the facilitators, I think, job as a trauma informed facilitator of psychedelic spaces. Again, even if that psychedelic space is you're just awesome acupuncturist and I don't mean to say just, like that alone could be your method, or maybe you're a mainstream psychiatrist and that's also opening altered states and memories. And in my opinion, I know it's not included in the traditional mainstream training, but definitely should be. The psychedelic integration stew. I mean, come on. and and something that I love to do with the stew. So think like nettles. We'll get into like other herbal allies, right? But like corn silk, two that we covered today, corn silk and horsetail. You could put in the wonderful, beautiful, supportive, calling in those plant nations. If we look at horsetail energetically, very strong. It looks like bones almost, which is wonderful for bone health and teeth health. Horsetail is just like, so for those of us who are like in female bodies in this class, you know, you're more at risk for osteoporosis, you're more at risk for dental stuff going on here, and especially like being in a woman body, and then also psychedelic experiences extra prone to depletion. So horsetail is wonderful for that, but anybody's. And and something that I love to do with the primordial medicinal stew of psychedelic integration that I've done frequently, I would say probably thousands of times over the years since I was 14, is like actually have the vegetables and herbs like out at the end, or go to a store or something with the person. If I was like with a, for example, postpartum person or something like that, and then like actually just have their body pick in the moment when they're still in the altered state, like what they need, is a beautiful way to personalize that primordial medicinal stew. It's a wonderful way to bring the client and survivor into their bodies, a wonderful way to help facilitate them building relationships with their own nutrition and their own plant nations like that. It's just fun. And it always turns out like it's just fun. At times I've even been, usually I would be tripping when I would make these. So I'd be like, oh, it's like a divination. Like it's like a diagnosis. I don't know. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but the wisdom of the body surely does know what it needs. So all I'm illustrating is that, and with any of our plant recipes we're going to cover throughout this course, it's going to change depending on the person and depending on the experience. Like at the end of one psychedelic experience, they may need extra yucca root. They may need extra horsetail. At the end of another, it may need rose petals, like we had covered, you know. So just a fun like thing you can do with horsetail. So again, talking about horsetail internally for helping evade mineral depletion and for supporting the kidneys and the urethra and the bladder post and during and pre-psychedelic experience. And side note, ode to the primordial medicinal stews as one of the original, most ancient ways for humans to absorb bioavailable plant medicine. Okay, next slide. Oh, that's horsetail again. Okay, so there's 3 types of horsetails, okay? And that I tried to include all of them. So this is like the more jungly horsetail that grows in the jungle. Okay, can we go back to the last slide? This is one that maybe you're more familiar with that kind of looks like tiny little bamboo that loves to grow. All of the horsetails love to grow in the waterways, like plantain, like where the water meets the land, okay? Marshy areas. And so depending on the altitude, it'll look different. There's different cousins, right? So like, so this is more high altitude or medium altitude. In the next slide, the jungly one is more like low altitude jungle. I see this growing in the Amazon. I've never heard it called snake grass, but probably it does look like a snake, and certainly grows near where snakes are, right? Because it's like that marshy area. No, there is, just side note, why I included the different types of horsetails, because there's this very powerful blood cleansing diet here in Peru that I learned from a bone doctor, where you combine all 3 types of horsetail. So like the one that grows at low altitude, medium, and high altitude, combine them in a tea, drink at least a liter or 2 a day for like at least, he was saying like 4 months. But again, I like to work like, give it a couple weeks, give it a month, see how the body reacts. You know, we don't have to just like prescribe something and sit on it. And it's for cleansing the blood, So like when we're looking at autoimmune stuff, we're looking at the body attacking itself, diabetes, cancer. I'm not saying to cure cancer with this. I'm just saying like it helps produce healthy cells and cleanse the blood. That's all. So also could be used post psychedelic experience, depending on why that psychedelic experience was sought out and what happened with the body in it. Sometimes people are seeking these healing experiences because they're physically very ill. No, I've helped a lot of people through diets and things that, yeah, have like stage 4 cancer, or breast cancer, diabetes, lupus is a big one. And so that combining the three types of force cells into like a protocol where you're taking the tea internally can be wonderful for nurturing the body while you're also cleansing in a very gentle, integratable way post psychedelic experience. Oh, that's just like a tip of force cell, pretty sure. I'm sorry. I like I got a little carried away with the horse though. Ooh. All right. Minding the memories. Okay, interesting slide. I'm trying to remember what that was about. I'm pretty sure this next group of plants is just going to be for, yep, is going to be for protecting the boundaries and activating the ancestral memory. Okay. And so we can go back to the last slide, Michaela. Sorry. Thanks for reminding me though. Thanks for reminding my memories. You awesome lady. Your birthday girl. Um, so when we're working with psychedelic experiences and survivors and the integration of that, something that I feel is like one of the biggest areas where there's holes there, and very dangerous, very not ethical, in my opinion, is the fact that frequently memories can come up for good and bad, during psychedelic experiences. Okay. So beautiful when we're having these, like connecting with our ancestral memory. And the next plants we're going to do, some of them are to specifically put you in touch more with your ancestral memories, to activate those, activate those songs, those recipes, those feelings of self-love, those feelings of belonging, I would say would be probably number one. And then for bad as well. No, I mean, frequently during psychedelic experiences in an altered state, survivors can have memories come up that maybe have never come up before. We've had, I forget who it was, and I'm sorry, but during one of our discussions or groups, I heard from someone in the group that they were like the first one that someone had told about having, like, I think been violated sexually in some way. Like they were the first person who was told that. And the more that you practice this, and I tell this as well to our doulas, who we're training, because again, very much about tending the altered states. Frequently when you're a tender or a safe space for altered states, or facilitating that in any way, again, massage, yoga class, a good anything, fasting, good prayer, frequently you'll be the first one. More and more you'll see that you're the first one who's been told, and that's a lot to carry. That's a lot for you as a practitioner to carry, which is why we have a whole piece on like protecting your boundaries and your scope of practice, and not like just because you're the first one to receive that doesn't mean you've signed up to like be their psychiatrist and their physical therapist and their herbalist and their advocate. However, I will say, like, just acknowledging the reality that if you're going to be a person who in any way participates in or offers healing in altered states to people in its varying forms, you need to have tools in your tool belt, which is why you're in this course, and thank you, to address those memories as they come up. Some of those tools are going to be our resource list. Some of those tools are going to be the national hotline. Some of those tools are going to be like, look, EMDR therapy, somatic experiencing, ketamine clinic, like giving them actual contacts of like, this is very helpful with these memories. And sometimes it's going to be, plants. So that's what I mean with minding the memories, is not only like for good, connecting with that ancestral memory, fortifying the benevolent qualities of your lineage, connecting back with your own internal belonging, but also having herbal allies in your toolkit, along with all the other allies we're going to give you throughout this course and have given you, to help clarify those memories. There can be a lot of confusion. There can be a lot of confusion around survivors in altered states with like, is this actually my memory? Maybe it was gaslit for like many, like, is this from my lineage? Is this from my childhood? There can be lack of clarity around it. So we want to clarify those memories, and we want to be able to allow space for them to surface and unfold in a way that's not re-traumatizing for the survivor. Okay. So following and or during the psychedelic experience and or before the psychedelic experience, these next set of herbs are going to be like key for integrating for that mind power. Okay. Next slide. Yerba Santa. Yerba Santa is a wonderful herbal ally indigenous to the Western United States, frequently found in California still today. Purple, pink, and white flowers, beautiful. Physiologically, yerba santa oxygenates the brain. So when you take like yerba santa tea, you can also smoke yerba santa. Physically, and hot plant baths and bottom steams, you can use the leaves for all of those things. It oxygenates the brain and helps, is going to be, what was the one we talked about? Blue tansy. Like blue tansy, I mean, they work differently, but similar to blue tansy in that regard, it can help fortify new pathways in the brain through oxygenating the brain when we want to reinforce the memories recovered, which are positive, I would say. Sometimes people can also have memories resurface. I forget, I think it was Natalia in our group was talking about playing in her garden with like and getting bug bites, and her grandma, like just now in our breakout rooms. And it's like, those are the things that maybe come up in altered states that we want to fortify, that it's like, oh yeah, like this is the lineage I've been practicing since I was young, or like, oh yeah, that thing, like when I thought I was a mermaid as a little person, and like I am for real. Or positive things like that come up in the altered state. Yerba Santa can help internally to fortify those, and before and prior. Now, for the, and I love Yerba Santa and consider her, very strong personality, or them a very strong personality as well, because on the flip side, Yerba Santa is also wonderful for holding in physiologically our hydration. It's interesting and not uncommon that herbal allies will, and we've, I think, gotten into this a little bit in our class with like, last class with the biofeedback, you're giving your body's information to the land's then like popping up with whatever herbal allies you need. Yerba Santa is very prevalent, in California right now, where all the fires are going on. It's very dehydrated. There's issues with water. There's issues with fire. And Yerba Santa treats and on a physical level helps your body retain hydration. So it's like, if we were just like trekking through California as it is, we may definitely be drinking some Yerba Santa tea. And again, for integrating and during the psychedelic experience, hydration is a big deal. I mean, I don't want to like overplay it too much, but it's just like, it can shut down the actual organs. I know it sounds so simple. It's like drink water, but like, hold on to your water. Your water is your creativity, your emotions, your life. And then physiologically, it also helps open up the lungs and treat the lungs. It's a heavy expectorant. So like, interesting that it's growing in California with all the fires, right? Because it's wonderful medicine for treating the lungs and helping get like toxins out of the lungs. That's physically. So we're talking teas, capsules, steams, or tinctures or vinegars or cordials, all of which we'll learn how to make. So meow, if you don't already. And energetically though, Yerba Santa is wonderful for minding so it's like, it can help fortify the positive memories, like we talked about, oxygenating the brain. It can help us clear out the lungs and speak our truth. I mean, not to sound too cheesy, but wonderful medicine for the lungs, and like opening up this whole area, which can be a big deal. Sometimes memories resurface, and it's like that step between like the psychedelic experience, the memories resurfacing, and then like putting words to that, whether in writing publicly, maybe you have to go to your family members and talk to them about it. Maybe there's someone you need to address now. Maybe there's some action you need to take. So it's like wonderful medicine energetically for opening up, clarifying those memories, opening up that voice around those memories, and then protecting boundaries, because energetically Yerba Santa is wonderful for protecting boundaries. One of my number one herbal allies for putting in your own non-culturally appropriated smudge bundles for protection and like holding those boundaries strong. Also antifungal, antibacterial, like many of the smudge herbs are, right? Because it's like they're cleansing energetically, but like, no, really, they're cleansing. and yeah, so all of those things. So we could be using her energetically, the flowers and flower essence and flower bath, or actually just like drying the leaves and burning them in a smudge bundle or offering throughout the psychedelic experience before and after. Okay, so all of those things: brain health, taking internally for the lungs and opening the voice around the memories, clarifying the memories, and then holding boundaries strong around your mind, around your memories, and around your energy. I will say it's not like rose petals where you could just like take it all the live long day. So it's like, this is one of the herbs where like, when in doubt, ask a main care provider, like if your client is on supplements or something like that, if you're taking it internally. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, that's another Yerba Santa flower. It's just pretty. I like it's just pretty. Rosemary. Okay, one of my favorite herbal allies to work with. I think Michaela has a tattoo of rosemary on you, don't you? Hell yeah. All right. So I love rosemary so, so much. Could any of these plants we could spend a whole class on, but rosemary, first of all, connects many of our ancestors. I would argue probably all of them. Not doesn't connect all of our ancestors to all of our ancestors, but some of all of our ancestors use rosemary at some point because she's so ancient and so prevalent across the continents, frequently incorporated into culinary recipes, and all sorts of like folk recipes like that into food, no? And so rosemary contains high amounts of romeric acids, hence the name, which actually tonify and support brain health and memory. You've probably heard like, oh, rosemary helps you remember. It's the romeric acids in rosemary. That's the active physical constituent that actually oxygenates the brain, heightens your clarity, activates the pineal gland, and helps clarify the mind. So we're thinking memory helps to tonify the memory. They recently started even recommending in some alternative treatments, rosemary, again, not instead of main healthcare provider, but like along with, for clients who have like Alzheimer's, dementia, early onset memory loss. Well, I've seen mainstream medical practitioners even incorporating rosemary essential oil or incorporating it into the diet just to like prolong the memory, prolong the instance of memory loss. And very, very powerful medicine. And so you can incorporate rosemary physiologically, so in food and capsules, tinctures, teas. In my opinion, wonderful smell, very nice flavor. It's summer there, I think, where everyone's joining in. So it's like a nice like iced tea with rosemary and lavender, or like lemonade rosemary, like rosemary lemonade. Breads. Also, I mean, rosemary's been incorporated into recipes, again, time immemorial. She's very antibacterial, antifungal, like many of the herbal allies that have been incorporated into our foods. Is to get rid of our parasites, get rid of our candida, get rid of our things that aren't available, to us right now. We don't like actually recognize seasonal cleanses in our modern diet, but it's like we still hold on to these culinary herbs that naturally do that every day, and yeah, wonderful for heart health. Again, every herb we're covering has many other properties we're not covering, but as far as clarifying the mind through psychedelic experience, I would heavily recommend rosemary, unless there's some aversion to it in your client or yourself, throughout before time protocol, during and after. I mean, rosemary is like a mainstay. Again, safe for pregnancy, safe for lactation. It's one of these. It's like, is it a food? Is it a spice? Is it a plant? Like, I don't know. Wonderful for that primordial stew. Definitely would incorporate heavily into diet before the psychedelic experience. I know these ones are more about integrating, but just to clarify that mind, and then after, to suss out any memories that there may be lack of clarity around, and then again to activate the new brain pathways and fortify new positive habits and integrate like new positive healthy information that we've gained through that psychedelic experience. Something, and we're going to go over other plants for when we do our next class. We're going to go for like lion's mane mushroom, lion's mane flower, tulsi, like other adaptogenic herbs that have been known to really help create those new brain pathways. But something that I feel is often missed, and especially for survivors and psychedelic experience, is like coupling the consumption of that herbal ally with with the same positive experience, right? So for example, like maybe we learned a new song or received a new song or a piece of it during our psychedelic experience that feels like very healing and healthy to ourselves or our clients, and then we're going to like use the rosemary when we're not use, we're going to incorporate and interact with the rosemary while we're singing that same positive song. Does that make sense? Or like doing your yoga practice, doing your dance, doing your qigong, doing your whatever it is. I feel like that's often and frequently missed. Like people will be microdosing, they'll be taking the lion's mane mushroom along with this and that, and just like same old kind of thing. But then what you're doing is actually ingraining deeper the same like non-beneficial activities. So being mindful of that, like you can create a practice around it. That's physiologically, sorry. But energetically, with the rosemary flower, I work frequently and heavily, and this will come up again in your herbal allies with sexual trauma, but just want to mention it. Um, I use the flower essence and flower bath of rosemary frequently for survivors of sexual trauma and everyone to activate their ancestral memory in a healthy way. So I forget again who it was in the group, but we talked about like what are the I think it was a question like what are the benevolent qualities or something like that in one of the classes, like what does that mean? And it's because like, or I think it was around our ancestor practices. It's like, yeah, all of us, like whoever's out there saying like, oh, I'm descendant from King Arthur and like I like definitely was this person in a past life and that person, but like very seldom do you hear someone say like, yeah, I was a rapist in my past life, like I was a blah blah blah, like guaranteed, like if you believe in past lives or not, just on a physiological level, like all of us have ancestors who, you know, a plethora of choices that were good and bad. Okay. And I would say in my case with my mom and dad, both were very complicated humans. That's the example I used, I think, to that question. Both are very complicated humans and died in very non-advantageous ways. However, they both had very benevolent qualities. Some of them have, you know, wonderful qualities and then also very shitty qualities, like very unhealthy and very bad. And so, and my daughter, Isabel, for example, she reminds me so much of my mom. My mom died by killing herself. She has struggled a lot with mental health, also an amazing psychology teacher, like one of the best. I still get letters from her students today. And so, and I see my daughter Isabel is like so much like her, so much like her. And but what I'm seeing is that I try to nurture the benevolent qualities, right? Give my daughter the nurturing for those benevolent qualities that I feel my mom did not get, you know, in her generation growing up. And so that we can just strengthen those qualities. And we're not trying to negate the other qualities because she also has some of the, I would say, more negative qualities of my mom too, is much more moody, you know, and different things, and can have like real emotional meltdowns where she spirals out. And so what I try to do is just like observe that from a neutral place, you know, but then really nurture like a garden bed the benevolent qualities. Okay. And so energetically, that's just to illustrate, energetically, we can use rosemary flower essence, bath, pusangas, and spritzers to really activate our ancestral memories of the benevolent kind. Okay. Your ancestral memories. Okay. Um, Whether that's separating them out from a specific ancestor who maybe it's like, or just in general, just recall. Okay. And also sometimes with survivors, and this is where it'll come up again, we can be working with healing actual sexual and reproductive trauma within the lineage. Okay, within the lineage. And sometimes I've had before where clients actually have memories that we've then verified later, like physically verified. They're actually remembering sexual and reproductive traumas that didn't actually happen to them, but maybe their mom, their grandma, their great grandma, their who, you know, and in my cousin Brina's case, she was actually adopted and still throughout her ayahuasca ceremonies would have memories, you know, of her birth mom, like that. And it can be interesting. So rosemary is wonderful, like energetically and physically, to really clarify those memories and then suss out like the boundaries as well, right? So sometimes I'll use like rosemary with yerba santa. Also, I use rosemary a lot in non-culturally appropriated smudge bundles. Wonderful. When you burn the rosemary, you release the romeric acid. So again, during the psychedelic experience, after, before, wonderful for healing ancestral sexual reproductive trauma, integrating healthy things, and having a good juicy pink brain. Okay, next slide. Rhodiola. Okay, rhodiola, originally indigenous to Asia, however, has since then spread far and wide. Rhodiola is also considered an edible herb. You can eat the leafy greens, medium sized, a natural, affordable food. Rhodiola aerial parts, flowers and leaves taken internally on a physical level are wonderful for oxygenating the brain. And I've mentioned this several times. I think we talked about blue tansy, yerba santa, and rosemary this class that do it. And then again, we'll have a few more in our next herbal class. But of the ones we've covered in this class, rhodiola is going to have the most heavy action towards brain health. Right. So we did mention this with 3 other plants, but rhodiola is like heavy on the oxygenating the brain. It's like I know it's used heavily in traditional Chinese medicine, like mimosa tree is, because they're indigenous to there and very effective. Again, I'm not a practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, but highly respect that lineage. Very well developed, thousands of years of unbroken herbalism knowledge there. And very heroic. I find as an herbalist, I'm like, wow, like you guys really work with what I would consider like very strong or heroic herbs. And rhodiola is one of those, but for brain health. So you can take her internally, tincture, capsule, food, tea, for oxygenating the brain before, during, and after psychedelic experience. Again, for providing that clarity of mind and integrating positive experiences along with it. Rhodiola is also considered to be an adaptogenic herb, which is just a made up group of herbs. Sorry, I'm like, it's all technically made up. Like, I mean, I'm just saying, just technically made up, like the countries and everything. Um, but, but, you know, the adaptogenic, like in the herbalism community, because they're not actually related. I mean, it's like different herbs from different families, but what the adaptogenic herbs have in common is that they tend to be more flexible with how we see as herbalists and science. We see that the adaptogenic herbs tend to have more range. So it's going back to the personality of herbs. Um, you know, certain ones like dandelion, for example, tend to have a pretty particular personality in action. Dandelions may be the friend where like you can kind of almost predict how they may respond in a situation or to a statement or something, because they like tend to be like a straight shooter, I guess you would say, in personality type, like not as much range. Like dandelion, and science shows, you know, goes into the body. Wonderful herb. I mean, you could again just only diet dandelion and be healthy, but it does tend to go into the body and specifically activate the liver, specifically activate the digestive system, and have more narrow range of actions within human relationship, if that makes sense. Like, and even if each client is different, dandelion you can kind of trust to go in and do the same thing more or less to each client, whereas adaptogenic herbs are going to be that friend where you're like, dang, like we were just at the strip club and now we're at church, and like now we're at like ayahuasca ceremony and now you're like fine still. So it's like, you know, that friend that's like a lot of range, like almost to the point where you're like, do you even have a personality? um but and that's kind of like in a nutshell what adaptogenic herbs are. Because why? Because physiologically they can go into the body, and what we see is that they can have a wider range of ways that they interact with the body. Rhodiola may go into someone's, you know, into my body if I like am struggling a lot with brain fog, a lot with memory loss, and just like directly activate the brain. But it may also go, you know, it may go to Michaela, who's sitting right next to me, who maybe is struggling more with adrenal fatigue, digestive issues, not sleeping well, and then nurture her adrenal system more, if that makes sense. So rhodiola is, and we'll talk about other adaptogenic herbs throughout this course. I feel like I hear them mentioned a lot now in herbalism, and like even like people make it their personality. They're like, I don't know, an adaptogenic herbalist, and it's fine, but I don't want to give off the impression that they're actually its own like kingdom or family of plants, because they're simply a group of plants that herbalists like clump together because they seem to have more range within the human body. They seem to be more flexible with how they can go into different bodies and interact with different organ systems like that. And so rhodiola is considered a very strong adaptogenic herb when it comes to supporting the adrenal system, supporting brain health, and like that. I did mention using rhodiola internally. So like as a wild edible food, the medium leaves. So like steaming, think stews. You can also do capsules, tinctures. The internal ways that we can take herbs is like food, stews, teas, and we're going to go over how to make all these because I know you don't know how to make stew. No. Capsules is probably my least favorite, but I do know like they can, in traditional Chinese medicine, they tend to use capsules a lot. I've seen, and like formulas with powders. And I do think they serve a good purpose, like tinctures, where it's like keeps the physical properties real fresh as long as you store them well. And also wonderful for those clients who may not love the taste of herbs. Herbal medicine is only going to be as good as how accessible you make it to your client. No, I've been the midwife before who shows up, or the practitioner, like with my like little mason jar of like dried herbs and my little tea ball, like in the Andes, like with mamitas. And then you like show up to the next like prenatal visit next month and you're like, oh, did you take the herbs? And they're like, yeah. But like then you get a glimpse in the cabinet. It's like fully full the jar because I wasn't catching, like I wasn't actually meeting them where they are at. Like you have 4 kids, like whatever, this is not your lifestyle. You're not used to like putting loose herbs in a freaking ball, and they're not going to take it. So tinctures and capsules can be a wonderful alternative for those of us who may not have time, who may not just like the taste of plants, or like me, I love the taste of plants, but like if you give me a dried sack of herbs, like I'm not taking it. Like my last 3 births, I had to get like satchel pre-made sitz baths, from Mama Earth, because it's like just being real. Like that's what I'm gonna do. Frequently in the herbalism community, what I find is that there's like a lot of debate. It's like a lot of us and them. It's a lot of like ego. It's a lot of like herbalists who maybe they want to list the physical constituents, but then they think like the vibrational parts are like woo woo and like bad for the herbalism community. So it has been hard for me to find ones that list like both, which is hence our books coming out. Okay. Sodro magar mula tina budu muye se ne sa Sodro magar mula tina budu muye Sene sa Sadra Tina Guru Sene sa. Oh, and I will say, like, while chanting or singing, and we'll get into this more in the singing class, but for example, just now I did 3, right, for Michaela's past, present, and future long life. You can do like one in each direction, one in each chakra, whatever you'd be working with like that.